learners, I welcome you all to this week 13, module 13, Understanding Education from Psychological Perspective. Today, before starting this lesson, I would like to introduce myself. I am Dr. Rajlakshmi Raina, Assistant Professor, Amity University, Uttar Pradesh. Today in this week, this module 13, we have two lessons, Concept and Scope of Educational Psychology, and the second one is Methods of Educational Psychology. We have already studied what is the concept and scope of educational psychology. So today we will be focusing on what are the different methods of educational psychology. Learners, after going through this session, I am hopeful that you will be able to discuss different methods, the various methods for studying the behavior of learners in educational psychology, as well as you will be able to explain the merits and the limitations of these methods. Methods of educational psychology, if you see, educational psychology is what? It is an applied branch of general psychology. It uses the research findings and principles developed by the psychologists to improve teaching learning process. Educational psychology, it develops necessary skills and competencies to understand, to control and to predict the behaviors of the learners. Various methods are employed to collect data on problems of behaviors of our learners. There are different methods of educational psychology. We have introspection method, we have observation method, we have experimental method, survey method, clinical method, case study method, and so on and so forth. So one by one, we will be dealing with each method. I'll see that you understand every method, the merits of these methods and the demerits of these methods, or we can say the limitations. Coming to the first one, we have introspection method. Now learners, if you see introspection, this is derived from two words. Intro means within and spection means looking. Hence, we can say introspection is what? It is looking within. So, introspection actually it involves observation of self. That is to report, to evaluate and to examine one's own mental state. It can also be defined as self-observation method in which the individual he perceives, he analyzes and he reports his own feelings. So if you see in this method, we basically look into ourselves, we introspect ourselves. We try to understand, there can be different feelings. So we try to analyze those feelings, why we are feeling, we try to question ourselves. You can say we question ourselves and we try to reach the solution. So introspection is, there is no, second person who is, involved in this type of method, but it is the subject himself. So he is looking into himself, he is introspecting himself, and he is trying to analyze, he is trying to perceive, and according to what he perceives, according to what he analyzes, he comes up with some report. He is able to understand what can be the problem, why he is feeling low. Like at times, we feel low, at times we are very happy. So we introspect. There are different moods we can have. So it is individual, that person himself, he is looking into himself. So this is introspection. Now, if you see this, there are different merits of this method. Why? First of all, if you see, introspection gives us a direct and immediate knowledge of our mental process. It is very economical, definitely, because the subject and the investigator, they are the same. And also the time and the place has no bar. A person can study himself, introspect himself anywhere. He doesn't need a proper laboratory for this. So you see, it is one of the best methods to know your mind, your emotions, your pains, your prejudices. So you are able to understand yourself as a whole. So this is one of the best methods. But then definitely it has got some limitations. Now what are those drawbacks? it is very difficult to study one's inner behavior by oneself, because the data of the introspection method may not be reliable, it may not be valid, since there can be that subjectivity, you may be biased when you are investigating your own feelings. So it is not reliable, it is not a valid source. Again, every person is not capable of doing introspection. See, if you talk of children, if you talk of an abnormal individual, it becomes very difficult for him to introspect himself. He cannot introspect. Again, introspection demands, a different type of skill. There should be a proper training. So it demands a lot of skill and training that needs to be acquainted by the individual. Now coming to the next method, we have observation method. Now what is observation? When we see, when we look at something, now here there are two things, two persons. One, the subject, and the one who is studying that subject. So here observation is one of the oldest and most used method, in educational psychology. It is very suitable method. You can study different types of human behavior with this method. And with this method, we can get information about the behavior of the individual when we observe. See, when we observe our students, we come to know whether they are happy, whether they are understanding your class, the topic, whatever you are dealing in the classroom. So you observe, you see their gestures, you see their, activity, what they are doing. So in this way you are able to observe. Suppose your student is not well, so he is not attending to your class. You see that he is feeling quite low. He is not responding the response what he gives. Usually he is not giving that response. So definitely through his activities you get a lot of information about the behavior of the individual. The mental state of a person can be understood by observing his external behavior. Whether he is feeling, he is angry, whether he is very happy. So when you see the external behavior of the person, you try to understand what exactly is his mental state. Now there are different steps, when we go for an observation, it again needs to be very systematically done. So there should be a proper planning, there should be proper preparation for observation. And you should be clear about the observation of the behavior. Then you observe that behavior, whatever you have planned to observe, and once you have recorded, you should analyze that observation, that behavior of yours, and then interpret, generalize the results. You will achieve the results. So you have to follow these 4 steps: planning and preparation of the observation, observation of the behavior, analysis and interpretation of the observed facts, and then finally you generalize, you derive, you deduce the result out of it. Now again, there are different types of observation. We have controlled observation, or we can say this is a scientific way of observing. We can say it is an experimental observation, where you have a controlled group. Everything is defined beforehand. And then the other one is uncontrolled. It is something, in the naturalistic observation, natural way when you are observing something where it is not so systematic, it is not so scientific. Then we say that this type of observation is quite uncontrolled observation. There are different ways by which we can conduct observation. What are these ways? Some of them are like, formal observation, informal observation, participant observation, and non-participant observation. Now let me tell you one by one what exactly it means by formal observation. Now, as the word itself says, formal. So from this word you can understand that everything is purposeful. It has been planned earlier. In this method, it is conducted in a very formal way. That means whatever you want to observe, even the subject is informed about the purpose, why he is being observed, what is the purpose, why we want to observe. The place is also defined, the date is defined, the time is defined. So you see, everything is quite formal, everything is pre-planned in a formal way. However, if you see, such type of observation cannot provide a valid and reliable conclusion. Why? Let me give you an example. See, For example, prior to the observation, if any school is informed that okay, such and such date, such and such, we are going to inspect you, we are going to observe. Now what have we done? We have actually informed them that we are coming for an observation. So definitely, what are the authorities going to do? They will be quite alert. They will see that yes, everything is at place. Whatever we have asked them that these are the things we want to observe, definitely they will see. So you are not getting the real picture. You are not getting the real behavior of the participants. So you see, now if you as an inspector, you want to observe any institution, you want to observe any educational organization, you already told them that yes, I am going to come on such and such date and these are the objectives behind coming to your institution. So definitely you are not going to get a real picture because everything is planned. So definitely they will also see that things are at place. So the real behavior of the participants cannot be studied in this type of observation. Now coming to informal observation. Now as the word itself signifies, what is informal? Things here, it's just the opposite of formal. We have not defined any purpose, we have not defined any place, we have not defined any time. So this type of observation is carried out without informing the individual. Now the individual remains unaware of the fact that his behavior is being observed. So here in this type of observation, we observe the behavior in the natural setting. However he is, whatever he is doing, he is not informed, and whatever he does, it is natural. Whatever, every activity of his is quite natural. So here the individual remains natural and her behavior and personality can be studied. So this is one important way of observing. Then again, the third way by which we can observe is participant observation. Now as the word itself signifies, participant means you as an observer is also one of the part, you are a participant in the activity. Now in this type of observation, the observer joins with the individual whom he wants to observe as a participant in the activity. Now for example, the observer may join with the individual in any academic activity and thus he gets an opportunity to come closer to the person whomever he wants to observe and he can observe the behavior of that person. But again, there is a limitation to this method as the observer's presence may obstruct the natural response of the individual, isn't it? He can become a barrier because of that which he may not execute the natural behavior which actually he possesses. Then we have another way of observing which is called as non-participant observation. Now, in this type of observation, the observer may take such a position that the individual who is being observed doesn't come to know. Like see, we have hidden cameras, we have videos, we can have an audio recording. So there can be different ways, these are all secret cameras we can have. So in this way, we can observe our subject, we can get an idea, okay. And the purpose of this observation is basically to study the natural behavior of the individual without making him aware that yes, there is something hidden, there is some hidden camera or there is some way somebody is observing. He doesn't come to know. It is non-participant observation. Now let us see what are the merits of such type of observation. How can we study the problems or how we can use this for our research purpose? What are its merits? Now, studies the behavior of the subject in the natural and original form. When we say observation, it is studying the behavior of the student. Then it can be valid and reliable method for carrying out a study. And definitely you need not have a big laboratory for this, so it is quite economical. We don't need any special laboratory, we don't need any special labor for this, we even don't need a lot of money for this. But then yes, we need specially trained person to investigate the behavior of this method. So it helps you in collecting both types of data, qualitative as well as quantitative, and for the purpose of your research, you can use this type of data. You can go for this observation method anywhere, anytime. So this makes it quite useful. These are the merits of observation. Now as I told you, if there are merits, there are also some limitations. So what are the limitations, or we say demerits of observation? There is lack of trained observers. Again, there can be subjective factor of the investigator. Subjects can be artificial. They can execute an artificial behavior also in front of you. Then observers can be partial. They can have a partial attitude towards the subject. Observation method totally depends on the external behavior. See, we are not studying the inner self of or the inner behavior of an individual. It is only whatever he is showing us. It is all external. So definitely these things make this method, we can say it lacks reliability and validity. And definitely what behavior he is executing now, it cannot be repeated at the second instance. So such type of, this is also one of the demerits, that it lacks repeatability. You cannot repeat the same behavior again and again. Now let us see the other method, which is experimental method. Now, as the word itself says, experimental method. So definitely this is a very systematic way of doing things, right? So in the experimental method, the importance is laid on the experiments and the observed outcomes. The phenomena or the material is put to test in this method. This technique helps in the scientific study of human behavior. This method helps in understanding, it helps in controlling and predicting the behavior. The experimenter, he needs a laboratory, especially he needs some classroom, or he needs a place wherever he wants to conduct that experiment. Now, the behavior of the control group and the experimental group are compared. You try to understand whatever you want to study through that experiment, whatever you are applying, you have two groups, one is the control group and one is the experimental group. And then you find the difference. What is the impact of that experiment? From there you try to record, you try to analyze. Now there are different characteristics of experimental method. It enables to study the behavior under controlled conditions. It is scientific in nature. The experimental method can be, you can repeat it without any difficulty. It follows the process of randomization, and definitely the results or conclusions arrived at through this method, they are reliable, and you can generalize also and you can use them. Now there are some steps which we follow in experimental method. First step is you identify a problem. Okay, you have to take any problem, like in the classroom you want to you have several types of problems which you encounter in our teaching learning. So you have to identify a specific problem, and what can be the different hypotheses for that problem. You formulate those hypotheses. Then you design the independent and the dependent variables. You controlling the conditions of the experiment, that is the next step. Now once you have selected the experimental design, you apply and you verify. There is verification and confirmation of the hypothesis by the result of your experiment. So it is, you can see, it's a very systematic and scientific way of deducing or coming or recording your things and coming to some results. Now there are a lot of merits of this experimental method. Let us study one by one. This method is most reliable, it is valid, and it is very systematic, precise and objective. It has universal application. If you see, there are thousands and n number of researches which go on, and experimental method is one of the methods which the researcher uses for finding out the, for analyzing his problem. Then it can be applied on everyone. Even we can have different animals on which we can experiment. We can use this method, and there are different attributes, like we have intelligence, we have personality, attitude, we have individual differences, mental disorders, and other psychological traits which we can easily study by this method. The conditions can be controlled and varied by the experimenter systematically. An experiment can be repeated as many times as required and the results of experiment can be verified. So this makes it one of the important method for collecting the data for solving the problems. Now again, what are the demerits of this method? Experimental method is very lengthy, it is time taking, it is energy consuming. And definitely you need a well equipped laboratory or you need some apparatus for conducting this method. And all this makes it quite expensive. It also requires an expert to conduct experiment. Anybody cannot conduct. You have to be, quite skilled, quite trained in conducting an experiment. It is therefore not very easy method. And sometimes, it becomes very difficult in controlling the variables. In the laboratory, we control all other variables and arrive at a finding regarding the relationship between specific stimulus and specific response. In actual life, several stimuli act at the same time and several responses appear. Hence, there is a gap between laboratory experiments and life. Now coming to the next method, we have survey method. This is one of the very liked method. You can say every researcher goes for this type of method. Now what is exactly survey method? It is used to obtain desired specific information through an extensive study where you are involving all the members of the population, or you can choose a sample, a representative sample. Now there are two instruments where we can use for collecting the information by the researcher in the survey method. They are questionnaire and they are interview. Now questionnaire in survey method, questionnaire is a form containing systematically planned questions. It is given to the respondents to collect answers to questions which he is asking. And there are two ways by which, or two types of surveys which are conducted using questionnaires. One can be through mail. You can mail to a person or from whom you want to collect the data. So you mail, that is called as mail survey, where the questionnaires are sent through surface mail or email or online. Then one is door-to-door survey. In this mode, the investigator goes to the respondent's house or office to fill up the questionnaire. Then next technique of collecting the data is interview method. Now it is the technique of collecting information from the respondent in face-to-face manner. Now in this also there are two types of interviews. One, very structured or standardized interview. Now what is structured? In this format, the interview is structured, that is, it is standardized and well in advance as per the requirement. The questions are set with probable response options. Now in unstructured or non-structured or non-standardized, in this format the interviewer is free to ask any question. All the questions, like I said, in structured things are already, all the questions are already there, and what type of probable response, that options are also there. But in unstructured, he is free to ask any question to the respondents and to get the desired information. Now what is the merit of interview? Proper rapport can be established, which helps in getting the most confidential information. There is face-to-face interaction between the interviewer and the interviewee. It is a flexible tool. What are the demerits of interview? The respondent may not reveal the real responses, and this is why it suffers from subjectivity of the investigator. It needs a skilled interviewer. You need to be quite skilled when you are asking question. What type of response you are getting, how you will ask the follow-up question, what is exactly your objective, what you want to find out. So you need to be quite skilled when you are asking questions. It is expensive in terms of labor, time, money. So you have. Now coming to the next method, we have the clinical method. This method helps to learn about the individual or a group of individuals to identify and analyze their specific problems and give suitable suggestions and treatment. The clinical method is used to understand the causes and sources of people's fears, anxieties, worries, their personal, social, educational, vocational, maladjustments, so forth, all these traits can be understood. Then the problems can be diagnosed by using many techniques, such as you can physically examine the case, you can have a case, you can study the case history of that person, you can have a clinical interview and appraisal of abilities and aptitudes. In case study method, it is a comprehensive method in which the investigator studies the history related to the problem, the present status and what is the future possibilities of dealing with that problem of that individual case. The individual who is confronted with an educational, mental, social, emotional or personal problem is called a case. As the doctor or the lawyer solves the problems of his or her client, similarly in the case study method, the researcher diagnoses the problem of the patient and then he provides a remedial measure. The main objective of this method is to diagnose and treat the behavioral problems and to provide better guidance and counseling. There are several merits also of this case study method. The overall investigation of the behavior of the individual you can carry out through this method, and also this method is very much useful for the treatment of the problems of children, problems of delinquents, maladjusted, or you can say emotionally and socially disturbed individuals. This is very comprehensive study of behavior and the results of this study are reliable, they are objective and therefore they are quite valid. This method helps in giving proper guidance and counseling to the individual since the investigator comes very close to the individual during the study. And let us see what are the demerits. The case study needs technical experts to deal with the subjects, and also the case study method is very comprehensive and it is very extensive. So this demands lot of time, it demands lot of labor, it demands skill, it demands money. Again, the data collected from various sources for investigation, you never know, they may or may not be valid also, they may not be reliable also at times, or an objective for the analysis of the investigation of the case. So you have to see what type of data you are collecting, what is the source of collecting that data. Again, sometimes the information obtained may become highly subjective and that may not be reliable and valid. The likelihood of errors in understanding the troubles as well as treatment is high. Therefore, extreme care must be taken to minimize the mistakes. So students, I hope with this session you will be able to understand, you must have understood what are the different methods which we study in educational psychology and how we can collect data for our research, for our different problems, solutions to different problems which we face of these methods. And therefore, I hope that with this you will be definitely, it will help you in your research also, it will help you to understand how you can use effectively all these methods to solve different types of problems in your day-to-day classroom teaching. Thank you.